loss is really common when we look, through evolution. I mean, look at creatures that are kind of marked by loss. One of my favorite groups are snakes, right?
Oh, no legs.
Where are those legs,
Yeah.
right? Well, they became burrowing creatures, a whole lifestyle. So they evolved from lizards, right?
Yeah.
So they evolved from four-legged animals. But you have this whole group of animals. They just ditched their legs, right?
Yeah.
Ditched their ears, too.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, no ears on snakes either, right?
Man.
So, loss is pretty common.
So
At the
snakes
same
are pretty
time,
efficient.
snakes are pretty efficient.
They
At
just
the same
reduce
time.
themselves to a tube with
To a tube.
muscles.
They're a tube, yes, with great muscles. But they've been doing a lot of inventing.
Yeah.
Venomous snakes.
Venom, yes.
Venomous snakes, and have been incredibly creative in the last 30 or 40 million years, inventing all sorts of venom toxins to take down their prey. And that's another example we see throughout the animal kingdom. Independent examples, right? You know about spider venom, you know about bee venom, you know about scorpion venom, you know about venomous jellyfish and stuff. Yeah. All independent inventions of venom. So these are new molecules that get invented, right? So this is inventions going on all the time, but that helps those animals get their supper. And that's a really powerful force in evolution, right? If you have a way to get your prey, you have a way to get food, this is like evolution almost in fast forward.
So language for humans is like venom for the other animals, right? Because we can cooperate and hunt.
Well, in our culture today, language is very much like venom. Yeah, but I think if you're making that analogy, but yeah, venom is a special power that these animals have, and it's vital to essentially their daily being. And language is something we came up with, walking on two legs and language, pretty big inventions.
Could you take embryonic Hakeem and stick a needle in me, change instruction, and I now have fangs and venom?
Yep.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
What?
Now, I'm going to say in principle.
In principle.
No, I wouldn't say it's impossible. There's probably a little bit of knowledge that we would need to build for. But when you know the program for making teeth, and we know a lot about it, and when you know how you might be able to sort of modify that a little bit to make an elongated tooth with a central canal, which is a fang, okay, then we could tweak that, right?
Wow. So
and then we know how to make venom. Yeah.
Wow, that's what I wanted to get into, man. Yeah. Because making this molecule venom, it is such a mysterious thing to me. I was like, how would that even come about, right?
The general idea here is this. All these characteristics we're talking about, all these creatures that fascinate us, right? The instructions for making them are in the DNA. And that book has been blown wide open to us, right?
So let me ask you a question about that then. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, go for anytime.
Does every animal have all of the instruction book? Or is it later animals have all of it because they have everything that came earlier?
Well, everybody's got their own instruction book. Sometimes some chapters have been torn out and left behind.
Okay.
And some have some new chapters.
Okay.
So, but they have a lot of instructions in common because they have their animalness in common. They have a lot of cell biology in common, which even is deeper than animals. They got cell biology that's in common with fungi and bacteria and plants and stuff like that, right? So there's some common parts of the code book. There's some unique parts. But that code book, which was, again, not accessible to us and starting to become accessible in the early 1980s. And then today, oh my goodness. I mean, the speed and the cost involved is now almost trivial, right? Where it used to be, too expensive or impossible. So yeah, I mean, we can look at any animal's genome. We are having a great time.
Yeah.
We are having a great time. And so what we do, it's a lot of science is detective work, right? You're playing hunches, you're trying to look around, you're trying to find those clues, et cetera. And kind of DNA science these days is exactly detective work. You're saying, I've got this creature here that doesn't have this capability. I got this creature here that does have this capability, and I'm looking around to try to figure out what does it have that it doesn't have.
Right.
And if I compare, for example, non-venomous animals, take a lizard or something like that, to venomous snakes, or non-venomous snakes to venomous snakes, I can see exactly what's going on when I look in the right place in the genome. And that's telling us that what's happened is, again, this co-option thing, taking something that was used for some other purpose and repurposing it. And so what's basically happening is that snakes are taking proteins that have been used inside the body to do something normal. They're making them, usually in significant amounts, in a gland and putting them into prey through that fang. And they're putting sort of abnormal amounts of something, either the same or a modified protein, into that prey, and usually disrupting one of two things. In things like venomous snakes, they're either messing up blood hemostasis, like clotting and heart rate and blood pressure, or the nervous system. They're stopping the nervous system, so for example, respiratory arrest.
So how does this begin? Before I'm sure it doesn't start out as full-blown fang with venom gland. So is the chemicals just being secreted in their mouth and they bite, and then it
probably components of saliva. Yeah, and imagine the way these animals were first taken down their prey was they're biting and holding on. Yeah. Now biting and holding on is kind of dangerous. Yeah, right? Yeah, you can go for a bad ride and get really roughed up. Yeah. So you can imagine the ability to strike and then sit back while the prey dies is a little bit safer attack mode, right? So if you can deliver something in your prey during that initial bite that will subdue it, then there you go. Well, so we've got a lot of enzymes in our mouth. We got a lot of enzymes in our saliva, okay? Right. And so what venom evolved from was some basic capability of having, digestive enzymes and things like this in our saliva. And instead of just sort of those things passively getting transferred during a bite, through this modified tooth, the fang, a delivery apparatus evolved that could deliver a more potent wallop of that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So you can sort of feel that transition from a bite, hold on with some kind of weak saliva to strike, sit back, very potent venom delivered, and let it do the job.
This sounds somewhat like what you described earlier, where you connect genes, but now you're connecting a saliva gland to a tooth formation gland. Yeah. And now they become a single system of venom delivery.
Now that's an apparatus, that then does your job. And when we look at the venom components, and these are fascinating sorts of things. And I got so many stories I'm running my head and say, which one should I really tell you? Yeah. But I'll tell you one that's really striking. One of my students is studying right now. So I don't know the reputation Australian snakes have, right? We've probably all heard Australia's dangerous.
Oh, yeah. As we're having this conversation, I was sitting here thinking about the box jellyfish, which is another
one. Yeah. So on land, they had a couple snakes called brown snakes and taipans, and they make me nervous. Okay, and I like snakes. And here's the deal.
Have you been bitten?
I've been bitten by non-venomous snakes. Yeah, I got an old buddy that he had a great saying, which was, he said, there were two kinds of snake enthusiasts: those who'd never been bitten and those who've been bitten a lot.
So there's no in between.
If you feel me where that comes from, because you can piece that together. Anyway.
I get it.
Yeah. So taipans and brown snakes, they're remarkably toxic. So ounce for ounce of their venom, one of the most toxic things on the planet. What have they done? And this is just to give you a picture of what's the strategy of venom. If you look at what their venom does to the prey blood, you can watch it in a test tube. It will clot like that. Okay? What they've done is they've taken two clotting proteins that we normally use to clot our blood in response to injury. Yeah. Packed them into the venom gland. They inject them into prey, and that blood clots like that. Jeez. So it's essentially instantaneous stroke and loss of blood pressure, prey down. Wow. So they've taken proteins that are used inside the body and then using them kind of outside their own bodies onto prey. Yeah. And that's the strategy of the venom. So you'd think venom, what is this kind of, special substance, et cetera? No, it's using existing proteins in a new way. Wow. Right? Yeah. And you can see when you already have that protein that can clot blood, it's just a matter of making more of it and delivering it in a new way into another creature in an unregulated way. So that creature balances blood clotting very carefully. You just overwhelm it and it clots instantly.
Do the prey respond with evolutionary changes to resist the venom?
Brilliant. It's an arms race out there. And we see this this all over the world. When prey are being preyed upon by venomous creatures, they're evolving all sorts of mechanisms. Some of those are, they're all sorts of levels. So the targets of the venom toxins are evolving. There's a lot of pressure, right? Because if you can be less susceptible, then that means maybe you got a better chance of surviving a bite, or a bite that's sublethal is not as hazardous, that sort of thing. It's going on it's remarkable. So this is the joy to an evolutionary biologist, or you might say the purpose to an evolutionary biologist of studying this, is that those arms races going on, meaning there's pressure for the predator, for the venomous animal to keep coming up with more and more potent venom, and there's pressure for the prey to keep coming up with ways to evade that venom.
Right.
So you sort of have evolution in fast motion going on both sides.
Wow.
And that allows us it makes the evolutionary process sort of, we just have more stuff we can dig into when it's happening on that kind of time scale. So it's measure, countermeasure. That's why we refer to them as arms races, obviously from the human analogy. It's all over the place. You go out west, there are rodents that are resistant to rattlesnakes. There are snakes that feed on rattlesnakes that are resistant to rattlesnakes.
Oh, yeah. So here's a question. So when we develop antivenoms from the movies I've watched, we typically make the antivenom from the venom.
Yes.
Do we ever use the praise mechanism to create antivenoms?
God, you got great questions. Nobody's done it yet, but I think that's the new opportunity. Now that we've learned enough, this is actually something my lab works on. Now as we learn enough about the natural defense mechanisms, we can exploit them. So what we did, this antivenoms got started in the late 19th century. At the same time we were making like antitoxins for things like diphtheria toxin and tetanus toxin and stuff. And what we do is we would immunize an animal like a horse with these toxins or venoms, take the blood of that horse, we'd refine it, and that would be the product we would give people who, if they had tetanus or if they got bitten by a snake, So that's a 19th century
So you're using that animal's immune system that has been exposed.
That's right, that's right. And given that, and we use antibodies today. I mean, half the drugs that we use today are monoclonal antibodies that we make in a lab that we give people for everything from cancer to eczema or whatever, that sort of thing. But these natural defense mechanisms, some of them look really, to me, they look really, really potent and broadly acting. And I think there are going to be some antivenoms coming out of this new branch of knowledge from the way the prey defense mechanisms work.